Hey guys, what's going on? It's Chris Vanderkay, your favorite found footage know-it-all. Today I want to talk about something that I've been thinking about for a while, the five most important found footage films. Now, I want to be clear, before I get into this list of the five movies, I want to mention that when I say important, I do not mean the best. That is a completely different category. Movies that are the best, I think, are very subjective in terms of what you like, what kind of mood you were in, honestly, how much education you have about film and what makes a film good. All of those things are they can change according to who's watching and how they feel about things. What I'm talking about when I say important, when I say the five most important found footage films, what I'm talking about is films that were important to found footage as a genre. Meaning, what are the films that made the most impact, were the most important in a way, in an existential way, in a reason for this genre to exist and to flourish, right? So that's what I mean when I talk about these five films, okay? So with that category in mind, we'll go ahead and dive in with the first one. And this one might be controversial because it is not entirely a found footage film. It's a found footage hybrid, but I'm going all the way back to Cannibal Holocaust, okay? Now, the reason that this one is on the list, even though it's a hybrid, most of the other films I'm talking about are not hybrid films, but this one makes the list. And the reason it's the most important, I'll get to in just a second. But one of the things I want to couch about Cannibal Holocaust that I think is interesting is because it was so early in the era of found footage. And I guess you could say technically it's not the first fake documentary, but it is sort of the first found footage film in the sense that this movie, even the half that is made narrative style, is talking about missing filmmakers, trying to find them, and then coming upon footage that they shot that they then take back to create a documentary out of, or at least to watch the footage of to make a documentary. So that footage is literally found footage. So in a way, the reason that this movie is so important is twofold. The first is that this is a movie whose narrative portion of the film explains the idea behind the premise behind all found footage movies, right? Uh, Somebody went missing, the footage turns up, we watch the footage to figure out what happened to the people who are missing. That is the premise of, for decades, most of found footage movies, right? That's even where the term comes from. Although technically there's a non-narrative version of found footage that's different. It's literally just about finding footage, not creating it, and then showing it to people. But that's the non-fictional, sort of more artistic side or avant-garde side. For fiction storytelling, this is the one that kind of told everybody what the premise of all the later movies in the genre would be, which is somebody finds it, shows it to you, that's what you're watching, right? But this movie, half of the narrative was talking about that, and then the other half was showing it. Now, the reason I think this one is so important, aside from that distinction, which is that this is the movie that's the primer that explains it all, is also this is the movie that proved that it could work as a film, right? Uh, by the time the film was made, there had been decades of previous film, both narrative film and documentary film. And what the director, Ruggiero Deodato, figured out, realized, or innovated, was he recognized there had already been some fake documentaries. What he recognized was that by shooting narrative footage and shooting it in a documentary style, it opens up the ability to be able to believe in it in a way that other people don't. The other movies are not believed by audiences, right? Because we started to see the artifice. We started to recognize when a movie feels like a movie because of the music and the way that it's shot and certain kinds of performing. Documentary strips away all of that for the most part, right? And so that's what he was utilizing. And this is the movie that I feel really proves that you could do that on the screen, you know? Not that it hadn't been done in other ways in small bits. We'll talk about that in other videos, the fake documentary style. But this proved that found footage as an idea was really viable to be able to tell a beginning, middle, end story with. And so that, for me, is the reason why that's one of the most important films of all found footage movies. Now, moving on from that one to another one is obviously going to, I mean, how can you have any conversation without talking about it, is the Blair Witch Project. Now, the Blair Witch Project is interesting because it is a found footage movie. A lot of people think that it was influenced by Cannibal Holocaust. And the filmmakers talked about that they were aware of Cannibal Holocaust, but that was not the primary influence for making Blair Witch Project. Their primary influence was the TV show In Search Of and other sort of late 70s documentaries that were about people looking into investigations of mysterious and unexplained things. So that's really more where they were coming from with Blair Witch Project. Now, when they originally started shooting Blair Witch Project, it was going to be in the style of, intrepid filmmakers making a documentary. And the aspect of the three characters going into the woods and then disappearing, that was going to be part of the story. There was going to be footage of that interspersed throughout what is otherwise a traditional documentary that talked about the history of the Blair Witch and the town of Burkittsville and how all of this sort of mythology weaved together. In fact, a lot of that footage, it wasn't just a plan, it was actually shot, and it was eventually turned into Curse of the Blair Witch, which was on the Sci-Fi Channel. And then, other footage popped up and promotional material. There was a ton of stuff online. It was one of the first big viral films, meaning having a website and having all kinds of ancillary, additional material about the world other than just the film. But the thing is, the movie was going to be that. And then was going to be portions of it that are what we saw in the finalized version. But then they did the exercise, which was to take the filmmakers out into the woods, and each one of them got specific prompts and plans that they were supposed to do, and nobody knew exactly what was going to happen. And so that beautiful footage that ended up becoming the Blair Witch Project, after the filmmakers looked at it, they were like, this is insane that we would try to wrap a sort of like stodgy documentary around this really affecting footage, right? So let's just focus just on this stuff, right? Let's just turn this into a narrative. Now, it's not that they didn't have any documentary aspects. There are sequences where Heather is interviewing people in the town of Burkittsville, some of which are staged and some of which aren't. But the majority of the film is the found footage aspect of it, and that they got into the woods, they got lost, et cetera, et cetera. The reason I believe that movie was so successful is because it did that. If it had kept the framework of the documentary around that found footage, I don't think that it would have broken as broadly as it did. The reason that it worked is because it focused solely on that really strong emotional core, and also it had a brilliant marketing campaign. Where did the people really disappear? The missing posters and all that kind of stuff. But so the reason I think that one is important is kind of what I was hinting at there, which is that this movie, Cannibal Holocaust, proved that it could be done. This movie proved that it could be a success. And I mean, I think nobody could ever argue that, right? It was one of the most successful independent films for, Jesus, it's still one of the most profitable films of all time because of how little it cost and how much it made. But it was an enormous success. It was one of those things where it was word of mouth, and it was advertising blitz, and there was the giant mystery around it. It was just this enormous phenomenon. And I don't think anybody could have imagined that a movie as cheap as this could have been as successful as this was. And so I feel like that's why this is the second of the 5 most important films of all time. By the way, in no particular order. These are just the 5 important ones. But that's it. It proved that you could do it and you could make it a successful movie. Now, moving on from Blair Witch to the next big one. There were obviously found footage films and fake doc films that came out after the Blair Witch. Bunch of copycats. Dudes grab camera and run out in the woods and make a movie. The next film that really proved something else, another, I should say a step up or next level up after that, in my opinion, is Paranormal Activity. Now, again, the reason that these are the 5 most important, this is the reason this is the third one is because it does something similar to what Blair Witch did, but then it also succeeds in a place that Blair Witch didn't. So this film that Oren Peli went and shot for, I think they say $15,000 is the original budget that they had. Obviously, it had a different ending that ended up being reshot. I believe Steven Spielberg at one point even weighed in on what the new ending should be and that sort of thing. And so it had an enormous campaign, successful campaign, because it was one of the first ones where they just showed you footage of the audience watching the movie and seeing the audience's reaction. And that was very big because what that was telling people is, we're not even going to show you what's on the screen. We're just going to show you how scary what's on the screen is by showing you how people are reacting to it, right? So hugely successful, right? Paranormal Activity knocks it out of the park. Even if you, let's say multiply the budget by 100 times, right? Instead of 15,000, it was 150,000, or still it made its profit so many times over that it's inevitable that we were going to get another one. Now, here is why this one is on this list. It did something that the Blair Witch didn't do, which is it proved that found footage could be a successful series, a successful franchise, right? Where the Blair Witch fell down was it made its first found footage film. It was an enormous success, super profitable. So of course they're going to make another one, but they didn't know how to make another one like the first one. So they made Blair Witch 2, which, it has its charms. There are people that love it and people that hate it. It's a completely different kind of movie that takes place in the same world. And in a way, that's one of the things I appreciated about it, is it didn't just try to tread the exact same ground. Whether it was successful in what it was doing or not is beside the point. But it was a narrative movie with little snippets. It had like an opening sort of fake documentary segment catching you up on what's been going on in Burkittsville since the movie came out. But it is mostly a narrative film. It did okay, but it didn't do anywhere near as good. Critically, it was savaged. And the franchise was basically dead for a very long time until Blair Witch finally came out many years later, which went back to the found footage style. Um, Paranormal Activity learned from the mistakes of what came before, right? It made that first film, which was inexpensive and it made a huge amount of money. It knew if they were going to do another one, they needed to try and hold on to what things about that first film made it successful. So they held on to the found footage aspect. They held on to, I guess you would call it the lore, the overriding lore. So it stuck with the family and the entity that was haunting the family. They extended out in the second one that there was a sibling and that the two of them had this other one was dealing with the issues as well. And then you find out, oh, it was actually, not going to go into huge spoilers, but you find out that there's a much bigger mythology in the second one. Then in the third one, it becomes a sort of a prequel. You find out there's a backstory between both of these sisters and things that happened in their childhood, right? Still found footage. Fourth film jumps ahead to we see what happened to the kid that went missing in the second one and what happened to Katie and to start to see results of how this is moving forward. So ultimately, every single entry of the Paranormal Activity franchise has been found footage, right? And that to me is why this one is important, because this is arguably the very first successful found footage franchise, at least on the big screen. There might have been, some directed video stuff, but this is the first one that proved it can be done. Cannibal Holocaust did that. Blair Witch, it can be successful. But then this one, it can be a successful series. It can continue on, continuing to be the kind of thing that it is, which is found footage. Another one that failed in that was The Last Exorcism. Solid first movie. Second one went narrative, did not hold its audience, never had another entry. But this one proved you could go, 6, 7 films. You can go a long time and continue to find new and interesting ways to continue to go back to that found footage well and still have it be good. All right. So that's Paranormal Activity. And then so now the next one, we're moving on to the fourth of the 5. This is Bad Ben. Now, this one's going to be interesting because I think this is kind of a litmus test. A lot of people absolutely love Bad Ben. Some people watch it and they're like, I don't get it. Just like one angry dude yelling at nothing, Here's the thing. I'm quite charmed by the first Bad Ben a lot, and I completely understand the people that love it. I can understand the idea that people don't love it, but the reason it's on this list is not because of its qualitative sense, right? It's not so much about was it the best movie in the world. It's what important thing did it do for the genre. Now there are other movies, individual movies that have done to some degree what Bad Ben did, but I want to make this point. So this movie, Bad Ben, the director, Nigel Bach, I believe is his moniker. I don't know if that's his real name, but he directed this movie, and I believe he's the star. And I don't know what the director writer's actual name is, but he made this movie essentially it was him. He was in the film. He's on the phone with any other character. We don't see any other on-screen figures in that first movie. It's inside of a house, and it's all about him interacting with the paranormal, similar to Paranormal Activity. However, it was somehow even smaller as a scale than Paranormal Activity. That one had 2 leads and maybe 2 or 3 other characters that had small roles in it. This guy was it. He was a solo show, right? So he was doing this entire thing by himself. I would just say fortunes converged and to work out really well for him that this was the exact right time for this movie to come out, for him to make this movie, because platforms existed where he could put it out into the world. I believe Amazon was the place where he put it, where it was Amazon Prime streaming, where people were able to upload. People still can, it's a different process. But at the time, you could put it up there, and then based on the number of people watching it, you would get paid out for the amount of hours that people watched the film. He made an enormous amount of money on this. Essentially, it's not a no budget, but it's as close to no budget as you can get. So it's essentially a no budget film, almost no cast, shot in his own house, very few visual effects, and which ones there were a little, questionable, but sort of played a little bit for laughs. And so what he did was he created a hugely successful franchise that is soon to be wrapping up as of the recording. I believe there's one more entry that he's going to be doing in the series, and then the series is over. But there have been, I think, as of off the top of my head, I can remember there's like 14 of them. So insanely large number of entries that he has continued to make. He didn't sell it to a big company. He didn't go with a huge distributor. They've all been owned by him. Any profit that is ever made off of any one of those movies it goes straight to him and whoever, if there's anybody who invested. Although I don't think there is, honestly. He made a good amount of money off that first film, and then he just sort of kept doubling down with all the later projects. So why is this on the important list, right? Because I mean, how many dudes went out and just shot a movie with their camera? But the reason that this one I feel like is a little bit different is that this is the success story that every other found footage film is filmmaker, or at least low level found footage filmmaker, is trying to reach, which is making a movie with what little resources that you have, getting it out into the world, having it be a success for you specifically, and not it didn't go through the machine, the conglomerate. Nobody else had to weigh in. He made it. He put it out. He became successful because of it. So for me, this proved. Let's go in the order, right? So, Cannibal Holocaust proved that it could be done. Blair Witch Project proved that it could be successful as a movie. Paranormal Activity proved that it could be successful as a series, and then Bad Ben proved that it could be successful as a series for anyone. That it wasn't just confined to studios and production companies that have the kind of resources to make it, right? Which is the great thing about found footage. So that's our first four. So what is the big number five? We've done Cannibal Holocaust, Blair Witch Project, Paranormal Activity, and Bad Ben. What's number five? Well, number five is going to sound like a cheat, but I promise you it's not only not a cheat, but it's the most important one on the list. The number five most important film, found footage film, is whatever the next one is. What I mean by that is whatever's coming out next, whatever the next movie is that you're going to watch, the next one that is released, the next one on somebody's best of list, that is the most important found footage movie, right? I would say if one of these had to rank at the top, it's this. What I mean by that is all of the efforts of everybody working in this genre are what's keeping this genre alive, right? Sometimes genres are hugely popular and will be around forever. Sometimes genres come and they're insanely popular and then they start to wane in popularity. For instance, right now, superheroes are huge. Will there be a point where they're not? Probably. The way we know that is because there's a time when gangster films and film noir and westerns were huge genres. And are there still some made? Yes, a lot of them. Some of them moved into TV. Some of them just sort of disappear, and then there's an occasional bump in the cycle, and we'll get a few, and then it'll go away again. Found footage from, I would argue, from sort of maybe the 2000s on, once the technology was affordable for everybody to have their hands on, this has been a genre that has sort of been self-growing, meaning people are fans of the genre and then they realize they don't just have to be fans, they could also go make it themselves. And so it becomes this thing where the people who love it end up turning into the people who create it for other people who love it. So it's this self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's why I say whatever the next film is the next most important found footage film. That's why it's the number five on the list, or arguably the number one, because we're all keeping it alive with what we're doing. Those of us who are talking about it right now, the people who are out there watching it, the people who are making the new ones that are getting ready to come out, all of the new ideas, or even just like fun versions of old ideas. Honestly, even the ones that aren't that good and we watch, but we still watch and we don't rank them low, because even though maybe it wasn't super impressive, the performances weren't great, there's still something about it that draws you and that captures you, right? And so that's why that's number five. So there's your top five. So thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions you'd like me to answer about the arena of found footage, please feel free to reach out. I'm the know-it-all, so I'll probably have an interesting answer for you. And I'll talk to you again next time.